Hi everyone, this is Mindy Eggen and welcome back to the My Favorite Things YouTube channel. In today's video, I'm going to be creating a mixed media card. Now, mixed media can sound very intimidating. I know I always felt very intimidated by it, but I've really been diving into it and experimenting with it. And what I'm going to do today is pretty much my go-to until I feel a little more confident to expand. One of the first things that I'm going to do is create my background. And for my background on mixed media cards, I kind of like them to be more natural. So I'm going to be doing ink smushing, which means I'm kind of letting go of some of that control of controlling how my background's going to look. There's a little bit of control to it, but really you're leaving it into the hands of your water. Now I have a slick surface here because I like how the inks bead up on it. So I smushed down some salvaged patina and blueprint sketch distress oxide ink. Then I spritzed that with water and notice how it beads up. I like it when it beads up like that. This is a piece of Distress Heavy Stock cardstock. It is really bright white and holds up really well to the amount of water that I'm going to put onto this. I smushed my cardstock into my squished ink that's on my surface. Kind of moved that around a little bit, and then I'm drying this with my heat tool. Now for my backgrounds, I like to layer up my inks, which to me is where you really get the added interest. So here I'm taking that paper now that it's dry, and I'm just tapping that into that ink mixture I have on my surface. Now I have these kind of ink spots on there, which I personally love. Once again, I'm going to dry it. I'm also tilting my cardstock, which helps let the water move naturally down my card, kind of gives me those water drips. So I dried it. Once again, going back into that mixture on my surface. I'm going to dry it again, and now I felt like I lost my salvaged patina. So I'm going to just wipe down my surface really quick, squish down some more salvaged patina, but this time I'm adding some distress ink. So it's the salvaged patina distress ink and also wilted violet distress ink before I did the oxides. And I think this came out amazing. I don't think I could create a background exactly like this again. And I think it's really fun to mix your oxides with your distress inks. Now, once again, I'm going to dry this. I want to make sure that it is completely dry before I move on because I'm going to be doing some stamping on this. Now, this also, it's a little warped, so I like to just run this through my die cut machine to kind of help flatten that out. Now, the second thing I like to do when working or trying to create a mixed media card is adding subtle interest to this background. And I'm going to start by stamping some of these butterflies from the My Favorite Things Winged Wonders stamp set. I pushed my cardstock up in my Misty using my Misty corners so I can have these kind of overhanging a little bit. And then I'm inking them up with frayed burlap archival ink, which is a permanent ink. Now, when I kind of inked up my images, I thought, wow, this is almost too dark. I didn't want it to overtake the background. I'm shaking my finger at myself. It's too dark. So I brought in just a scratch piece of cardstock. I'm stamping these down. I'll remove that scratch cardstock and then stamp that second generation onto my background. So I was liking the concept of this, but it was almost too light and too brown for me. So I'm going to ink it up with Hickory Smoke, and this is still in the archival ink. Sorry about that. So like I said, this is just subtle interest. You're not going to see it as a focal point, and that was the whole purpose of it. It's going to be a little hard to see on screen. When I kind of bring it up closer to the camera, you'll be able to see it a little better. Once again, I stamped off on scratch cardstock and then stamped that down over those images I already stamped. So very, very light and just kind of a nice touch to add. Now to clean these, I do have an archival ink cleaner that I just dab over the stamped images and wipe down with a cloth. Now, the next thing I like to do, and I see this a lot in mixed media projects, is adding stencil or some sort of paste to this. So I have this brick wall stencil that I'm holding down over my surface with my magnets for my Make Art Station. And I'm going to start off by adding just a little bit of white pigment ink. I plan on using a glitter paste, but I wanted it to show up a little bit more. Normally the glitter paste here is translucent and I wanted it to show up a little bit more. So that's why I added that white pigment ink over the top. So I'm just applying this glitter paste over the brick background, and I'm making sure actually that the edges are not even. I don't want it to be perfect on the background. I want it to be really just, I hate to use the word natural again, but I wanted it to be scattered. I'm going to remove the stencil and I'm going to take it over and wash it real quick so that glitter paste doesn't dry over the top. Now, while this is still wet, I'm going to take some Perfect Pearls in gold and just add a little bit to my surface here. I'm going to add a couple drops of water and flick this over my background. I purposely did this while that glitter paste was still wet because I thought it would look really neat with these gold flicks kind of drying into that wet medium that I have on my card front right now. I'm going to set this off on the side to dry, and I'm going to work on stamping some images and a sentiment for the front of the card. Now, I'm still using that Winged Wonders stamp set. I love butterflies when it comes to mixed media projects. It's just kind of a go-to and it just inspires me. So I have here a piece of white cardstock that I prepped with an anti-static powder tool, and I'm going to ink up these butterflies using VersaFine ink in the black color. This is because it stays wet longer, and I wanted to add clear embossing powder over the top. I actually had experimented with this prior, and I had done it in kind of a lighter color of ink or even just using white, and it didn't stand out as much. The black really stands out, and I'm going to be able to do some Embossed Resist. And because I have that black ink, this is really going to pop off the front of the card. So I melted that clear embossing powder. You'll know it's all melted when it goes from kind of that cloudy look to this shiny black. And now I'm bringing in my Salvaged Patina Distress ink, and using a mini blending tool, I'm adding this color to the center of the butterflies. To use a mini blending tool is really helpful for these small areas, and I kind of brush out towards the edge of the wings. And then I'm going to bring in Wilted Violet, and I'm going to go around the very outer edges of my butterflies, kind of two-tone my butterflies a little bit. And I also really love the color that kind of forms when you're mixing the Salvaged Patina and the Wilted Violet. I'll continue going around the outer edges of the wings and even bring back in that Salvaged Patina a little bit to kind of brighten that up. Now, because I embossed this, I'll be able to just kind of wipe away any excess ink that is laying over the top. I think this would also look really cool if it was using that black VersaFine and maybe embossing it on vellum. I think would be really pretty as well. After I have this cleaned off, I'm going to line up the coordinating dies and die cut these out. I left this part in a video because it was really funny. I always wear my bracelets when I'm filming, and I couldn't find my little die for my butterfly, and I happened to pick up my arm, and I have a magnetic bracelet on. So I just kind of flipped up my arm, and there was my butterfly die. So if you ever lose your dies, maybe check your jewelry that you're wearing. Then I can move on to stamping out a sentiment, and to do this, I'm still using the Winged Wonders stamp set. So this is I'm getting a lot of use out of this stamp set. I have a piece of black cardstock here that I'm going to prep with my anti-static powder tool, and then I'm going to ink up my sentiment in the Unicorn pigment ink again. So it's a white pigment ink. I'm going to sprinkle on my white embossing powder, and sometimes I'm going to have little flicks of that embossing powder still stuck to some of the areas. And what I like to do is just take a fine paintbrush and kind of brush away anything that is left over where it shouldn't be. Then I'm going to melt this embossing powder with my heat tool, and for whatever reason, I always kind of do a quick pass on the back and then come to the front. I don't know if that really makes a difference. It's just kind of my habit that I've gotten into when heat embossing. So after that is all melted and it's cooled off, I'm going to use my mini paper trimmer to trim this down into a thin strip. Now my background is dry, and I did trim that panel down to about 3.5 by 4 3/4. And because it is still a little warped, I am using some double-sided foam sheets to help even that out. So you can use regular foam tape, but I prefer the foam sheets because it's providing even coverage over the entire back of my panel. And then I can add this to a white card front that I have cut to 4 1/4 by 5.5. I'm using some of the scraps of that foam tape to line behind my sentiment, and I can add this to the front of the card. Now the butterflies right now are just placed there. They're just kind of a placeholder. I don't have them attached to the front of the card yet, but after I go ahead and attach my sentiment, then I can put some more leftover pieces of that craft foam on the back of my butterflies and add them around my sentiment. I purposely placed my butterflies like this, but they're because they're kind of framing my sentiment. So drawing your eye into the sentiment for the front of the card. And then I came in and added just some clear sequins mix. I'm using my jewel picker and some liquid glue. Liquid glue is really the best, especially when you're using or you have a textured background. So I thought I was done, but something just didn't feel right to me. I thought I just needed to add something else to it. So I'm going to finish it off in just a moment, but here is a closer look at that background. So we have that subtle interest using, kind of the ink smooshing background, the brick stencil, and then also those stamped butterflies that we did. Now, whenever I feel like I need to add a little bit of something else to my card, I grab my white gel pen, and this really did it. This really made these look like the butterflies are glowing and just have that little bit of interest to them. So I'm adding this white gel pen to kind of the smaller areas and smaller dots of the butterfly. And then that will finish off my card project for you today. So I hope this has inspired you to try and play with some mixed media cards. It's really just mixing your mediums. So I have glitter paste, I have ink blending, I have an ink smoosh background, and because I did kind of subtle background for it, I think it just all played together really well. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you again soon.